Peace, and I'll be talking about our work a little bit later in the session, so I won't go straight into it, but we're going to be looking today at this idea of peace as a Christian vocation. So like any standard kind of presentation, what are we going to be doing is usually that kind of first slide. So first of all, we're just going to have a bit of time to explore what that idea of peace means. It's kind of an incredibly kind of wide and diverse topic, so giving you a bit of a chance to pull that apart a little bit. I'll then talk a little bit about why it's an important part of Catholic social teaching, kind of where it appears, and then finally just an opportunity to discuss ways of bringing learning about peace and peacemaking into the classroom, but also hopefully the wider school as well. So just a bit of an outline there of what we've been doing. But I'm afraid I'm not going to be talking to you the whole time. I want you to kind of do a bit of talking as well. So the first thing I'd like you to look at, and I do this for all kinds of different groups, is looking at the idea of what kind of is peace to you through looking at different statements. So I have 5 statements on the board. Peace is an action, peace is a feeling, peace is being safe, peace is being valued, and peace is the absence of conflict. So what I'd like to do with the person next to you in the time-honoured tradition, which statement do you agree with most? And if you can, why? Why have you picked that statement? So about a minute, off you go. Let's see what we can Okay, so I've heard some very interesting ideas already. There's always a part of me that, to be honest, would just love to stay on this for like a whole hour because it's fascinating what people come up with. But is there anyone who wants to maybe share what statement they agreed with and why? Yes, please, thank you for kicking this off.
I went with peace as a feeling. I think for me when I'm meeting, I think of peace, I do associate to inner peace more so than maybe peace with another person. But then I also said the last one, I feel like it's quite a literal definition of peace almost. And then the feeling, the idea of being valued, I think that's more of a feeling, like you feel valued. And also you feel safe, so I feel like it just kind of encompasses them all, because you can be in an area of conflict, or there could be an area without any conflict, but you might not feel peace with yourself, you might not be happy with where you are at the moment in time, things like that.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I really I like that idea of kind of inner peace. We often talk about when we're thinking about peace, we can split it into different levels of peace, and inner peace is that very first one, that inner peace, interpersonal peace, and then we have this idea of global peace as well. So it's like tick for kind of key vocabulary there. Excellent, thank you. Anybody else want to kind of share? It is always that thing as well. Feel free to say something completely different. Kind of.
Yeah, one we said on our royal we're in agreement that peace is an action. Because in order for somebody to have a peaceful feeling or to feel safe or to be valued and for to be the absence of conflict, somebody else needs to take action to create all those others. So we said it's like one that underpins everything else.
Great, yeah, interesting. Yeah, the idea of actually needing to do something to put that into, literally, we talk about putting into action, don't we? Putting it into practice, creating those safe environments, those safe communities, those peaceful places to be. Thank you very much. And is there a third? I'd like to, three is so.
I mean, I do think all of them could be valid in different situations, but I just picked peace as being safe, just from a point of view of perhaps the students that I work with, and they come to this area by the chapel, and there are so many students. It's the most unpeaceful area in the school during break and lunchtime, and yet all those students come there because they feel safe there, and they know they can be themselves, and they can talk to other students of their age or different ages, and they all look out for each other, and they get biscuits. So I feel there is different, for them, that is their peace in school.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, the importance of biscuits, definitely, and food. But yeah, also the idea of, being somewhere where you feel safe and being able to kind of flourish, the idea of inner peace, being at peace with people, again, the importance of the place where you are. Now, I've got another question to ask you, but then I will kind of come back to this slide again and those ideas of safety and value. So the next one is, I just really like it because I like the discussions that come from this kind of question. But the idea is it's kind of an opinion spectrum. Often you might have kind of done these in classes where which statement would you agree with more, or are you somewhere in the middle is the question. Do you agree more that if you want peace you need to work for justice, or do you err more towards the side of if you want peace prepare for war, so that idea of defence, so literal kind of security in that sense. So again, just about 1 minute, off you go. What do you agree with more, or are you in the middle? Come up with. Obviously, I am biased. I work for a peace movement, but I promise if anybody is far over that side, I'm not going to kick you out or anything like that. So, anybody just want to share where they'd maybe be on this line, and again why? It's always good to get those reasons. Yes, please. Oh, this way. Excellent. Yes.
Because that preparing for war, it's not a peace. It's a fear.
Yeah.
So it's a false sense of peace. It certainly wouldn't be inner peace. It's certainly not striving for interpersonal peace, and it just breeds more violence. So very much over there.
Excellent, lovely. Thank you. Really interesting. Oh yes, another.
I said that the idealised me would be over on the far left of this continuum. But then I thought about, what is a war? Does a war have to be violent? And then you could consider, the story where Jesus goes into the temple and sacks the temple and boots everybody out. And we talk about righteous anger. So, is war always violent, or could it be a war of words, a war that uses diplomacy? So sometimes I think that you do need to be an aggressor, but perhaps not necessarily using violence, just to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Interesting, and that kind of brings us on then to questions maybe around, you know, conflict. You know, is conflict necessary? You know, how we resolve it, isn't it? Kind of questions around that as well. You know, we all come into conflict. Does it always lead to kind of that war, argument, etc.? Really interesting question. Oh yes, please.
So we said that we really wanted to be, our hearts went right to the left, like Julia said, but really rather than getting ready for war, it's being aware so that we're not naively and blissfully working, but unaware of the other confrontations and not necessarily enemies, but those forces against us, so that we would be more prepared, we would understand and be able to empathise then and be able to solve the challenges so that war does not occur, but that we are informed and then can be like an ambassador for peace, so to speak.
Yeah, fascinating idea. I suppose there's always that dynamic, isn't it, between the ideal and actually the reality. And yet, if we're talking about working for peace in school and being peacemakers, it's also potentially about that awareness of actually how we deal with the potential of violence, conflict, etc. So, very interesting. I'm enjoying it too much, but yes.
And the opposites, really. Because if you look at the world situation at the minute and people joining NATO, they're preparing for war, aren't they, training themselves. But I don't know whether... I don't know how I feel about that. I'm confused about that, you know, because they're definitely preparing for war by joining NATO and preparing to defend themselves. But I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I just don't know how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And then the idea of working for justice, you do that at the same time, don't you?
Yeah.
So they're not. I don't know they're opposites.
Interesting. I don't really have an answer to that myself, to be honest. But yeah, definitely that idea of, you know, do things always have to work kind of separately? Do things always have to be polar opposites? And also that idea of, you know, if we're looking at the reality of the world today, you know, we do tend to, just globally, we are more towards that side. We talk very much security in the sense of kind of weapons, but could we also be talking security in terms of, you know, making us kind of safe and secure from kind of climate change, climate disaster, etc. You know, what is security? Is also another question that this could kind of lead on to. But I won't. We'll kind of move on. So just to kind of give you a reason why I kind of bring up this quite a lot is that idea of justice. Anybody, if you want peace, work for justice. Anybody kind of want to throw out there who I stole it from?
Sorry, no, you stole it from Nene.
I guess I did steal it. I'm afraid it's not mine. It's a pope. Name begins with a P. An A. Yes, excellent. Well done. I have no prizes. If I did, you would get them. Yes, so Pope Paul VI. This is something he said in the Celebrating World Peace message, and that is very much runs throughout a lot of the documents that comes from his works, like Gaudium et Spes, all about the idea of justice, human dignity, and really, when you're looking at it, ultimately about peace. So when we're talking about peace as part of kind of Catholic social teaching, I get really excited because I'm like, it's really in there. You know, wherever you look, you get slightly different kind of principles, but peace is always there. It's that idea that's a really key teaching within the church. And it even goes back from that kind of biblical basis of, you know, Isaiah talking about, you know, nation will not kind of go to war against nation, you know, swords into plowshares, all the way through to that New Testament, Jesus being known as, you know, the Prince of Peace, talking about blessed are the peacemakers, you know, that idea of non-violence and the idea of conflict. And there's so much you can really get into about how peace is a really core message of the gospel. And then within church teaching itself, we've had kind of encyclicals, you know, kind of talking about peace, and in particular, Pacem in Terris in, I believe, about 1964, you know, was a really key document in calling for, you know, disarmament, firstly, very active kind of anti-war, pro-peace message, but also really talked about human rights and that idea of justice and peace being built and founded upon justice. And that then was carried on kind of through Pope Paul VI, and then even up till today, Pope Francis is I mean, in some ways, the peace movement, we think he's great. We could just quote him constantly, really calling for, peace in the current situation, but just as well the idea of his real calling to put Catholic social teaching into action. He is Francis is a real it's the name that suits him to the ground, really, such an apt name for the Pope. And then what also really excites me, if I'm 100% honest, is the fact that all of this basis that we have, peace being a key element of Catholic social teaching, and that idea of peace being about justice and founded on a just society, is also echoed in a lot of more secular work around peace and peacemaking. So there was an academic, Johann Galtung, unfortunately actually just passed away in February. He spoke about and did a lot of research on what peace is, and he came up with this theory of there being negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace being just the absence of war, which was one of our statements there. But he said that actually if we want true peace, we need positive peace, which is peace essentially with justice. He talked about it in terms of having our basic needs met, having human rights respected, but really it's the same message. And I find that just so exciting, how people from all these different traditions and backgrounds are coming to the same conclusion of what peace is. And I spoke just at the beginning, we had the idea of inner peace mentioned, and when we're also looking at peace and those levels of peace, we can again see it reflected very much in the Catholic Church teaching and spirituality. So if we're talking about inner peace, having a look at that spirituality of peace, that prayer, maybe those feelings of calm, even practically looking at meditation and the stuff of Teze, and their peace message, looking at interpersonal peace, Catholic social teaching all about community, participation, solidarity. And then finally, looking at the idea of global peace, we've got the Church calling for disarmament, for peacemaking, for the end of war. So all of these things come together, and I think really give us an opportunity within education to approach peace in so many different ways. Because sometimes I think it might be a bit scary to come in and be like, we're probably not all able to go on marches against nuclear weapons or anything like that, although I'd love to get you on some if you wanted to. But there is that idea of even just within the prayer life of the school, bringing peace into it. The fundraising that you do, can there be a peace emphasis? So by looking at Catholic social teaching, and the traditions of the Church, it gives us these avenues to explore peace in so many different ways. And I have lots of examples that I can just throw at you, but I do want you to actually reflect upon your own practice and your own context as well. So I'm now going to work backwards a little bit and actually talk about Pax Christi. So as I mentioned, we're an international Catholic movement for peace. So I work here in the England and Wales section, but we do have partners all around the world. There's about 120 organisations in about 60 different countries. So it again gives us lots of different ways of conceptualising peace and examples of people working for peace, whether it's to protect the environment, whether it's anti-militarism, or even whether it's I love that there's a project in Burundi trying to give young people job opportunities so they don't get dragged into local militias. So peace building can work in many different ways. So what do we fundamentally believe peace is? And this is when I'm going to skip back a little bit. So we think the idea of that, those middle two, if you like, the idea of peace is built on justice, is one of our key principles, where people feel safe and where people feel valued. So that idea again of actually human dignity and the importance of that also underpins the work that we do for peace. So we believe peace based on justice, being safe and being valued. And so now I'll skip back again. I maybe should have just put slides like slide, never mind. So what do we do? So we work through campaigning, so we very actively work for peace in that sense. So campaigning around the arms trade, nuclear weapons, We have partners in Israel Palestine, so we do kind of work to bring kind of discussions around dialogue and working for peace there. We also work in solidarity with our international partners, so supporting each other, sharing the work that we do. We then have a whole focus on prayer. So I have some prayer cards with me today. We do kind of liturgies, resources for things like that for use primarily in church communities, but they could very much fit into your schools as well. And then finally, we think education is a really key strand of the work that we do. The idea of firstly, if we don't know what peace is, we're not going to achieve it. We need to have those conversations about peace, and we need to equip, in my point of view, young people, but actually we need to equip everybody, the church itself, to be peacemakers and having the tools to build those peaceful communities where we feel safe and valued. So that's kind of the work that we do, and why we think education is a really key strand of that. We need to teach peace, essentially. So I want now just to give you, and I realise for you at the back this is very small, so I do have some other quotes available, but I'd like now just to give you a couple of minutes to reflect on your own practice, your own school communities, kind of what you've heard, but also through some quotes. So I've got two quotes here, one from Pope Francis and one from Pope Benedict. There's a couple of others that I'm going to pass around. And I'm just going to ask you, again, with the people next to you, have a read through the quotes. What are these quotes maybe calling you to do? And kind of what might that mean for your practice, your kind of school community? And if you can, maybe think about what you're doing already. I think there's very much me coming in here and being like, you need to do X, Y, Z. But actually, what are you doing already in your school communities that could be classed as working for peace? So a lot of things for you to do there. Read a quote and talk about what you think it's kind of calling you to do, but what are you doing already? And I'll let the people maybe at the front focus here, and the rest of you I'll kind of hand out some little sheets. And off you go, starting. Okay, so there's a very lovely kind of hum in the room. You might be chatting about the weather, but hopefully it is the topic. It's kind of always it's always a difficult one to tell people to stop when they seem to be very fruitful. But we'll move on, and hopefully, if you've got more to say, do feel free to find each other again and have a chat over tea or coffee after the break. So I don't know if anybody wanted to kind of share some of the discussion that they were kind of having at this point. Maybe anything first of all that you kind of picked up from the quotes. I know there were a couple of different kind of conversations. Ooh,
we went off track a little bit, talking about. So at my school we have a cadet unit, and I recognise and value what it brings to them. In terms of the outdoor education, they go sailing and they really enjoy it. But I'm just very uncomfortable with the notion of militarising children. But I'm aware that there are arguments on both sides there, and that those who join the cadets get a great deal from it.
Yeah, thank
so
you.
That's certainly, for me, a conflict.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you. And that's kind of something that I will mention on the next slide, actually. So good to be. But it was also on a personal level, kind of previous life, kind of working in secondary school. Again, that kind of was one of the things at first. I suppose I was kind of interested in peace anyway, but that militarisation of young people started to become something that kind of really got me into this kind of peace education and kind of what is that about world. So it's quite an interesting one to kind of bring up. So we will talk about that later, but kind of again, thank you. That was really interesting. Anybody else want to talk about anything they are doing in their school that kind of builds peace in some way?
I work in a boys' school. In East London, and it's quite rough and tumble at times, and there's very rarely is there a sort of serious fight or anything like that, but there's just a lot of sort of daily interactions which are quite aggressive. I guess I just, if I sort of see something going on, I tend to just sort of go peace to the kids. That's my little thing. But also I find it's quite a challenge to be peaceful at times. It's really hard. I love this quote about like the architecture and the art of peace. Because you've got the structures around you that sometimes you don't have very much control over, really, and then your own personal response, and even those things can be in conflict. As much as I might want to be a witness of peace to my students, it's not always easy to do that. When you're trying to manage quite kind of difficult behaviour and so forth. So, yeah, I think it's a real sort of aspirational thing, isn't it? And a constant desire to say, how can I really live this out? How can I sort of develop this art in my context?
Yeah, and that, Pope Francis often really uses this phrase, artisans of peace. It's something he comes up with quite a lot. That I don't know, we're all there to create it, to mould it, but keep going with it, I think. But yeah, really interesting, and you could have a whole other session about school structures and whether they really kind of bring about peace and about equality. And Quakers in Britain have done a little bit of work around peace and peace education, and they do touch on that. So if you are interested, I can maybe put you into touch with them. Excellent. So I'm afraid I'm now going to come up with all my ideas. I had a bit of a, if I'm honest, I started thinking of ideas and then had more ideas and more ideas and more ideas. So these are more just, I suppose, more questions to kind of help you to mull over rather than this is a checklist of what you need to be doing. Kind of doing all of them means you probably have time for nothing else whatsoever. So just some kind of ideas that I've kind of come across, particularly in kind of working with different schools and different peace movements. So firstly, I think you're in an excellent position, kind of if you're teaching religious education, and particularly kind of the new education directory coming out, peace is there. It's very explicitly mentioned. Pax Christi even is, which was very cheery for us to see. But peace is there. There are lots of opportunities, and Pax Christi we have resources you can use. We're trying to build resources. So if you're there thinking that actually Pax Christi you're missing something and I want you to make it, tell me, because my job is to do that. So we have resources, and very explicitly it's there. We are in kind of, depending on what board you're using, it is slightly different, but questions around conflict, suffering, war and peace pop up, and in some of the Pax Christis as well. So again, we have resources for that. But if you don't explicitly do Pax Christi, there are lots of other peace movements out there that might be relevant. So people like Christian CND, or even CND themselves, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, those people also have lots of resources out there. And again, if you want to kind of have some links to them, I'm happy to forward them on. We also have resources for core RE, so that is often a place where you can kind of mould to get in those questions of war and peace, conflict, etc., and kind of maybe even make the links to other elements of Catholic social teaching. But then there's also questions of, who are the saints you are talking about in your classroom? Are they, St. Francis, obviously the big one, but things like Blessed Franz Jägerstätter was a conscientious objector in World War II, bringing in those peace voices. St. Oscar Romero also as well, and Catholic do some great work on him, but he was also very much an example of non-violence and peacemaking. And the stories that you're using, are they the stories of the non-violent Jesus? If you're doing Blessed are the Beatitudes, Blessed are the Peacemakers, is such a key one for the work that we do. So firstly, just in RE, it's explicitly there, and please do use those opportunities. You are the experts in that, so I'm not going to kind of lecture you on it, but please do look out for them. Now, in other lessons, thankfully, peace is a very much cross-curricular topic, so if you are kind of into that in your school, there's lots of opportunities, and if you're not, this could be the opportunity. So as Pax Christi, we work as part of something called the Peace Education Network, and we have two resources about teaching peace that we've created with other organisations. So we have a primary resource, which is assemblies, and a secondary resource. And this photo is also on our stall, so if you come to our stall, we have a set of 50 lessons with a whole range of organisations, so everybody from War Child, Quakers in Britain, Religious for Peace, the Coromila community have all contributed lessons on peace to this pack. So if you don't know where to start, this could be something that you might want to look at. But also then there's questions around, citizenship, PSHE, building the idea of working for peace, being peacemakers, active citizenship, global citizenship, human rights education, all of this stuff really. I probably shouldn't say it's all the same stuff, because my boss probably wouldn't be too happy about that, but it's all along that same line. And then there is a question around STEM subjects, and I'm sure I won't get into the politics of it. I've had some conversations with our teachers around the politics of kind of STEM subjects. But STEM subjects are fascinating in the fact that often schools invite kind of companies with a military background in to kind of talk about and encourage STEM subjects. So if we're looking at teaching about peace, if we're looking at teaching about STEM through, for example, BAE systems, is that also an opportunity to talk about peace and where that might lead that technology? So there are kind of maybe links you can make, or even scientists for global responsibility do a lot of work about looking at science subjects, but from a sort of sustainability viewpoint and a peace viewpoint as well. So kind of where can those links come in? And then also form time. We do resources personally for form time, but again, maybe that is an area in which you could develop some of those questions around peace. Within the wider school, I know some people might be in with chaplaincy, and so again there's questions around liturgy, spirituality of peace, prayer resources, etc., etc. I won't go on too much. There's questions maybe that you could bring in around remembrance. I think most schools have red poppies. Could you maybe do something with white poppies, for example? Looking at the wider school community, students you were talking about maybe getting into conflict over here. Some schools have introduced peer mediators. So instead of when there's students arguing, them going to teachers, students are learning amongst themselves how to kind of settle those conflicts, how to kind of work through those different problems. So that might be something. You mentioned cadets over here. If you've got a cadet corps in your school, could you maybe it is hard to challenge, but could you bring in questions around again that peace, that militarisation, and looking at fundraising and campaigning. Again, you can fundraise for peace, thank you, and you can do campaigning on peace issues. And then in your wider community, who are the local peacemakers? Who do you know in your local area? In Wales, there have been some schools that have looked at local peacemakers and then in drama kind of worked through their stories. They're bringing them into RE, kind of looking at those local ideas. And then finally, each year, Pax Christi celebrates or promotes Peace Sunday. So we promote the Pope's peace message. Could that be something that you bring into your school? You'll be relieved to know I'm going to stop there. But just hopefully an idea that actually there are tons of ways that you could bring peace into your school, into your community. We are kind of getting towards the end of the session, but I am going to give you one more chance to talk to each other. Just a bit of a time to decompress after I've just thrown everything at you. Is there anything there that you find is interesting that you could work into your school? Just about a minute to start to maybe question some of those things. Off you go, and then I...
I'm not sure.
Okay, so I'm now going to curtail your conversations, but hopefully in some ways it's great to hear that you're not stopping, because hopefully that's kind of brought about lots of areas for discussion, for hopefully to you to take away and to really reflect on and think about how you might want to put that into practice in your school community. So we don't have really enough time for questions, because I do want you to be able to go and have some more coffee, have some more tea, and if there's any more pastries. But what I will say, we do have that new resource. If you're interested, come and ask about it. And if you would like some more kind of conversation about peace education, Quakers in Britain as well have a document really detailing why schools should kind of invest in it. So if you're interested in that, I'm very happy to share some details. But do finally just have a look at our website. Like everybody, we have social media. And if you do have any questions or anything you'd like to ask, do feel free to email me there at the bottom. Kind of going around are some newsletters and our leaflets. There's not quite enough. You can grab them on the store, and we also have some prayer cards there as well. Please feel free to take them. And I'm now going to say you're free to go, but thank you so much for coming. If you have any questions, please do ask.
What was that? Was it scientists or
Scientists for Global Responsibility. Yeah, and they do something called, they don't quite do it now, but they used to do Science Week, and they still have some resources available for that as well. Yeah, excellent.
Just on behalf of ATCRE, can I just thank Ashleen for a very thought-provoking presentation. It's clearly something you thought a great deal about and very important to you, and so thank you very much.